Hey guys, and welcome back, and thank you very much for your patience. I was actually totally meaning on making a new video, but however it's been quite challenging the last few weeks for me, so I apologize for the slight delay there. So now that we're back, I just wanted to give you basically a really in-depth rundown of basically what it was like to live in the cult of Scientology, and the differences between real life, non-cult life, and inside the cult. So it could be at some point I might even say something slightly positive about Scientology, but please do always keep in mind that Scientology does not have your best interest in mind. It's pretty much looking for your money, and when you don't have any, which is in my case, and also if you've stopped giving them money in other people's cases that you may have seen, they just literally steamroll over you and leave nothing behind. Okay, so just keep that in mind. I've had somewhat of what I would consider really a tough and slightly odd upbringing. So I'm, at the same time I'm aware it's probably not the worst thing that could have happened to me. In many ways it affected me in my adult life basically. So that's basically what I want to be talking about on the channel. So buckle up guys, because I will start from the very beginning, alright? So I was born to a very young black woman on the island of Guadeloupe, which is a French department, and my father was a Caucasian French gentleman, considerably older. So I'm aware that he already had a family before moving to Guadeloupe. A lot of people do that. They had an only child, which was me, and that's how it begins really. Okay, so just to give you a bit of a rundown on my life with my mother, I would say that she is actually a very harsh woman, likes discipline, and when it's you under her roof, it's her roof kind of thing, so her rules go, and if they're not followed, pray really. So yes, so she was, I would consider her a harsh woman. I've not spent a lot of time with her, but what I do remember when I was with her is constantly having to be quiet, having not to move as a child around or behave like a child basically. So my memories of her were more towards the negative than there were positives. I'm not saying that there wasn't a time where we kind of laughed or whatever, but it's been overshadowed considerably in my opinion. You could probably say that I'm being overly harsh towards my mother, and that's one way of looking at it. But I kind of, I'm probably not the only one that shares that sentiment, unfortunately. I think she's well known in my family for being a very militant person. Don't touch her stuff, doesn't like to share anything, it's kind of and if you take her stuff, you might as well just disappear, right? She was just aptly named femme de fer, which is a literal French translation for Iron Lady. You may have probably heard quite a few stories on how Scientology took part in literally breaking bonds between families. And those is true, I've seen it myself, alright? I come from a family, where it's just my mom and I really, but we weren't bonded, alright? But at the same time, Scientology made no effort to even improve that. I'll get into details as to how exactly later. It's just to give you really a sense of understanding that a lot of people who say that the families have been destroyed by Scientology weren't exaggerating. Scientology does not accept bonds, familial bonds, or any kind of bonds. You have to be 100% bonded to the cult itself, alright? If you're not, then that is a big no. So the reason why I was not bonded to my mother is just because I think earlier on in my childhood, before we even were affiliated with Scientology, she just wasn't very much present. I do recall a lot of, early childhood memories. Many of them didn't involve her. A lot involved my aunts, or even a different family altogether. For instance, when I was 1 year old, my mom's friend's sister, who she wasn't acquainted with, asked her if she could take me to France for a year to live with her and her husband. And my mom, funny enough, said yes to that. Now, it wasn't that my mom was incapable of looking after me or anything like that. We lived in the family, everybody kind of supported each other, but my mom, for some reason, said yes to that. And so I went off with, who I consider now my other mother. So MG had a husband and a child, which she was carrying to terms, and essentially took me to France to live with them. I really don't know why, she even asked. I really don't. It is a bit of a slight odd request. It's you seeing your sister's friend's kid and thinking, hey, that child is so cute, I'm gonna take it. So it is a bit weird, but I've had only fond memories from my time with MG. All right, her kids are my siblings for all intents and purposes. Lovely people. I'm still in contact with them due to my brother actually finding me. He was scouring the internet for me, even though I went on a blackout pretty much. I actually have an extended family of MG now, which they're my family, So everything went fine, and as promised, I was returned to my mother when I was 2 years old after MG gave birth to my little brother. Now again, that is just a period that I vividly recall, alright? I was able to describe events from early childhood that people are like, oh my gosh, how do you even remember this happened, So I do have a really good memory of how things went. So when I was taken back to my mother, I lived with my mother and my aunts in Guadeloupe. I went to nursery, I went to preschool. I'm not sure if I'm using the right English terms for them, but I was going into your normal kid, your average kid's upbringing pretty much, right? But again, during that time of my life, I do remember more my aunts taking me to school, and also taking me from school. So my mom, for some reason, I don't really recall. I remember, she used to work in a school. She must have been probably about 21. She worked at a school. I've got some memories of that, and I have memories of this particular photo shoot that we did. People stopping me in the street to fuss over how cute I was. And also I remember going through Hurricane Hugo with her and my aunts. So I do remember bits, but they're just too far apart. So shortly after Hurricane Hugo, my mother left for mainland France and left me with my aunts. Again, I was really looked after. I had my routine as a child. I went to school, etc. So a few years later, after my mom departed, she asked my aunts to bring me over to France. By that time, she had already become a fully fledged Scientologist. She was working on staff at the CEC Paris, which is the celebrity center in Paris. I can say that looking back, I was kind of oblivious on Scientology's effects. I do know where I noticed it the most was the fact that she would try very hard not to use physical, corporal punishment on me, which I thought that was odd a little bit. Especially when I came from a family where it's kind of an integral part of parenting and socially accepted back then. So although she did try not to hit me, because obviously Scientology frowned upon such behaviors, and if she did lay a hand on me too much, then she would have had to declare her sins, in easier terms to explain. So I guess, there was a lot of shouting, there was a lot of, punishing by doing chores, but most of the time she wasn't at home. All right, so my childhood consisted of being quite young and living in an empty house. Now, if you know what Paris is like, and if you don't have a lot of money or don't come from a family with a lot of money, you can just imagine the space that I could have lived in. It was just really like a studio flat, but tiny. All right, so if you know Paris, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So just a tiny studio flat. I know she was gone for hours of the day, all right, because I just got bored in that tiny studio, and I was just left alone. And the thing is, what bothered me is, looking back, is how young I was. Sometimes I do see people with children walking by, and it's like, oh, that child is 6 or 7, and I realize how young that is to be, leaving a kid at home alone, basically. So when she was absent and came back, there was a lot of, she was kind of discontent that I didn't do the dishes or clean around the house, or the house was a tip. I wasn't a very easy kid at all, I must admit. I will tell you, things that I've done that I'm not proud of as well. But yeah, I wasn't an easy kid, but having a kid trapped into, a living space the size of this living room for long hours in the day, the kid's gonna get bored. So yeah, she used to come home and shout, why is this not done? Why is this way? Why did you go through my stuff? It's kind of like, it was like the norm, basically. Life was just, early childhood life was just a blur of, long being left alone in the house. My mom always gone. I knew she was at the, at the org, but obviously she couldn't afford a babysitter for me, and she just thought maybe I could handle being alone for long stretches. So really, I do not actually blame my mom for working on stuff. She would have probably was earning very, very little pay. I actually don't know what a staff member in an actual public org earns. I'm hoping it's a lot more than the SEAL members did earn, but to be fair, I don't know. It was something that I never asked. So it's, I can only speculate, but it looks like my mom had to work at the Celebrity Center, very long hours, and then I probably had to hold down another job, all right, to kind of make ends meet. But at the same time, even when my mom was working very long hours, it didn't seem like we had basics in the house. We were kind of lacking food, and just like basic stuff that you should have in your house, right? So now looking back, I'm kind of like, oh dear, okay. So, my mom just seemed like she was working all hours of the day, but still can bring enough in so that her and her kid could be well fed, and have clothes on their backs. So, looking back, I'm totally seeing the influence of Scientology already on there. Now, my mom we do not come from a family with money, all right? So when that happened, then Scientology will ask them for your time, i.e. working for them for not a lot of money. So that's how they trap poorer families with basically a bit of a carrot being given by them, saying, oh, well, if you become a staff, then you will get, a 50% discount on these courses. Now, again, I don't know what it's like. I was way too young to understand, how being a staff member was in those orgs, okay? I'll give a little bit more information as to how it ran in the actual CEO org, but how my mom had in my early ages must probably be, I can only speculate, right? But I do know, when we joined the CEO org, it was like, oh, it's great because now you can go up the bridge for free. I do know that my mom used to also be a nanny for the richer Scientology. So the people that actually went on course and paid for the courses, that had the means to actually afford these courses, my mom used to nanny for the kids so they could go on course, all right? So that's just another way where it's like, all right, if you can't afford, afford the bridge, then you'll be used as something else. Yes, she got paid for it, but at the same time, based on my memories of, the house to be lacking food and other basics, the minimums, she wasn't paid a lot, all right? So, it was just like a very odd, looking back, it is just a very odd place to be, really. It's either like, I've always kind of seen most of the time either a family well off but doesn't give the time to a child, or a family that's very close but doesn't have a lot of means, but it just felt like I had neither. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of a precursor, I guess, as to my relationship with my mother and her relationship with Scientology. I was back then way too young to understand it, but in the next video I will explain how progressively and when in my life Scientology became more prominent. So I'll discuss this, but I do realize that I could talk for hours about my childhood trauma. But we'll cover that in the next video, okay guys? So thank you if you've took the time to watch this whole video, and see you on the next video where I'll be discussing my first steps in Scientology. And also guys, if you do enjoy the contents of the video, just give it a like, alright? And also you're welcome to subscribe to if you want to follow me on this journey, alright? It's going to be a long one, I won't lie, but I think it will be insightful for yourselves, and hopefully cathartic for myself, alright? So a bit of a symbiosis relationship going on there, okay? See you next time, and thank you very much guys. Bye!